Hello, welcome to our EV Ready building session discussing operation and maintenance. This video aims to help anyone interested in preparing their buildings for EVs understand the management and procedures once the EV chargers are installed. I'm joined by Malcolm McComas, whose building has gone through this process, Fred Tuckwell from the Owners Corporation Network, and Scott McLaren, an electrician and EV charging infrastructure installer. So Malcolm, if I could start with you, how are you managing the operation of the shared chargers?
So far, no problems, but it's early days. We've got one shared charger in our garage. We have a small apartment building in Wallara, and 11 apartments and 24 car spaces and 3 visitor spaces. So we have one visitor space which has a shared charger in it. It's bring your own cable, and it's powered by an app. You sign onto the app, swipe your credit card or put it into the app, and that then bills you directly, and then the body corporate receives a rebate of the cost of the power minus the commission to the service provider.
So one of the things we were concerned with originally with having a shared space was the actual scheduling of the charging. You probably don't have a problem, but with just 11 apartments, do you have any issues with the scheduling of the charging?
No, we've got 3 chargers connected to our infrastructure backbone at the moment, and 2 owner chargers and 1 for the visitors space. So it's not really a problem at the moment.
Oh, okay.
No, but it is under a load management system which will regulate the drawdown if we're hitting, sort of peak capacity for recharging.
And now that the infrastructure is in place for the building, have owners gone ahead and installed their own charging infrastructure?
Yeah, 2 owners out of our 11 have installed their own chargers, but it's a common charger throughout the building. So it goes with the energy management system, and that's paid for by each owner. And the charges for that are to have the charger connected are about $1,800 for the universal charger. And that comes with a cable and a holster to wrap the cable on, keep it nice and tidy and off the ground.
Okay. And Scott, what systems are there in place to ensure that the Owners Corporation is reimbursed for this investment?
So most of this, actually all of the systems come with some form of billing platform, billing software, which to your point sits in the back end of the charger system, so that when the end user uses the charger, their credit card is billed directly for the use of that energy, and those funds are then collected via the software in an escrow account and deposited back into the Owners Corporation's bank account of choice.
Yeah,
usually on a monthly basis is the consensus.
Yeah. So how does the billing side of that work for the person that's using the charger?
So depending on what system you're using, and there are many, generally speaking, the user will have their own independent account that will have their details stored in it, their payment details stored in it, so that the charger, when that person is using, the charger knows what person is using the charger at that given time, and they can then take the funds directly from their payment method, collect the funds in escrow, disperse back into the Stratus bank account.
Okay. And so for the individual Owners Corporation, how are they making sure that the money is going back to the right place?
The power is drawn from the body corporate meter and reimbursed to the body corporate account. So it's a closed cycle. And our charge is part of a network of chargers. So when you open the app on our particular charger system, it shows all the other similar chargers in the area on a picture. And so if our visitor's car park charger was being used, you could drive off and charge your car somewhere else on that system if that's the system that you want to use.
Okay.
And just usually with that as well, just to add to this, because this is important from the Owners Corporation side, usually when the funds are dispersed back into the bank account, it comes with some sort of transactional ledger to show what's been used and what's been dispersed back in, so that you can then match that up with your energy bill.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we as the owners can actually put in the cost of our electricity into the app. So for our visitor charger, we just charge it out at cost, which is our hourly rate, kilowatt hourly rate provided by our power supplier, energy supplier.
Great. Scott, what's the process for authenticating the chargers?
So again, that's such a broad question because they all generally have their own process of it. But generally speaking, there'll be some sort of process where you tether onto the software of the charger via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and then set the parameters that how you want that charger to perform. So, for example, if we have 10 chargers sitting on a load management system where the maximum amount of power we have is 80 amps, we can set the chargers on that line so that they will communicate back to the load management system, and that can then send a signal back through to them to slow down.
But there's nothing that the individual EV user needs to do in that situation.
Well, again, depending on what system you use, generally speaking, if it's a privately held charger, the owner of that charger will be sent an invitation to create an account for whatever billing software you're using, as we just spoke about. And all they'll have to do is a one-time thing, set up your account, add your details, set, forget, choose the charger.
Okay.
Our system's slightly different in the sense that all our chargers are directly hardwired back to the individual power meters for each apartment. And so we just have a fob to authorise power from that particular charger for that particular car space.
And that's been billed back to the individual owner?
Yeah.
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 Also, your privately held chargers are wired back into the individual lot.
Yes.
And your shared charger comes from the common.
Correct.
Yeah, you understand.
Yeah, and the common.
And where you have the ability to do that, that's certainly, in my opinion, one of the best ways to do it, because then you're not having to introduce third-party billing softwares and whatnot. You can just be billed directly from your meter. That's not always the case. It depends on the layout of the building, but certainly where you have that opportunity to do that, that would be the preference.
Okay. And in terms of signage or instructions that are actually in the car park or next to the chargers, what path did you go down for that?
We just have the visitor charger labelled as visitor charging. It's visitor parking / visitor charging. And the rest of the chargers are actually in the individual unit garages, or allocated parking areas. So that's the only signage we have.
And did you give any special instructions to the residents about what was required?
Yes, each resident gets a sheet of paper which just explains exactly what you've said about our charging system, that it's direct to the meter. It carries a fob with it for authorisation to use that charger. And if you're going to the visitor charger, the instructions come up on the app. And there's a sign on the visitor charger which says, download this app to use this charger. And we've got a BYO cable policy there so that it's not our cable that gets lost or stolen or damaged or lying on the floor. It's bring your own cable, plug it into the charger and plug it into your car.
Okay. Fred, might I ask you if you've seen any other approaches to this in terms of communication to the building?
Yeah, I think in the instances here, we're sort of talking about the broader, probably, the upper end of how you do it. There's also, a DIY basic thing. Not everybody's got a strata manager. Not everybody's got, access to, a whole billing platform, and neither do they need to. Like smaller walk-up apartments, for example, might just simply say, well, we just want to have a time clock, which will manage the scheduling of how you do it to avoid charging in the peak hours, and have a simple meter in it. So you just meter your own electricity, and then every month somebody goes and reads the meter and charges you back by your strata fee. So there's an easy way of doing it as well. So I think it's important for people to understand that there's a whole range of opportunities, and we're down a path now of just keeping it simple. The simpler the better, and people just don't understand the technology so much. All they want to do is charge their car. So let's just keep it as simple as we can.
And I think one important aspect of that in looking at the options is to get this scoping study done at the outset, to get a consultant to come in and say, have a look at the system, address the power requirements for the building, how they're going to cable it, and how it's going to work operationally, including the billing platform as well.
100% agree. And before that is the survey of the residents. So is this going to be something that we need 1 of, 10 of, 20 of? In a small building, it might just be 1 or 2. next step clearly is the feasibility. It's an absolutely imperative part of the process to go through, so you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and the checklist and the pro forma questionnaire provided by the EV Ready team, it was helpful for us as well, and we got 100% response rate on that, and they all endorsed the program. So that gave us a good platform to go forward and get the consultant study done, and then to obviously implement the system.
Great.
Back to your point around signage, though, and I think this is important to understand as well, and this is more from my side, I guess, from the technical side. It's important to understand that when we're installing these systems in buildings, regardless of whether it's a level 1 plug-in system or a level 2 or even DC fast charging for that matter, it's important from a safety perspective that we identify that these systems are installed in the building. And a good example of that is if there was ever say a fire brigade get called out, it's really important for the fire brigade to understand if they are dealing with electric vehicle charging infrastructure in that building, and if they are, where it's located and how they go about isolating that supply before they start pumping water into car parks. So I think that's really important as well, more so from the technical side.
Great, thank you.
That's a good point. Each of our EV charging infrastructure, where it terminates at each car park, there is an isolation switch, and there is a master switch back in the energy control room, the switchboard room, which flick of a switch, and you can isolate the whole system.
So that signage should generally should be at both locations, the isolation point, but also if you have a fire panel in the building, super important to have it there, because that's the first place the fire brigade's going to go when they turn up to a building that's any fault reported in. It's important for them to understand where to go and look for that isolation point as well, because they could be searching around the building and not know where it is.
Malcolm, what's the process for a resident to want to connect to the chargers?
So our garage is now all wired up with a backbone system. So there's a termination point and a data cable going to every garage or every shared garage. Owners have got to install at their cost their own charging system, but they must use the common charger that we've got compatible with our system. And we've got that priced by a supplier, and it's literally plug and play. They attach it to the wall, comes with a cable and a holster to stack the cable in. And they also have an access fob, which is dedicated to their particular charger. And they swipe the fob when they want to charge the car, and it automatically recognises that that fob is linked and authorised to that charger, and the charging system then happens automatically.
And what does it mean then if you've increased the electrical backbone of the building? What does that mean for the other residents in the future?
That just means that every resident can just ask to have a charger installed. There's no requirement to go for body corporate approval. We've already got that approval process in place, and we just have to ring the installer, and they will come along and attach it to the wall at the termination point, connect it to the system, tie the data cable in as well, and register the charger on the system. And then they get their fob and their instruction sheet, and they're away to go.
So just adding to that, there's been a lot of reference to need for communication and a lot of Ethernet cables and that sort of stuff. Wi-Fi is an option, but Wi-Fi doesn't usually work well with cement, so that's a bit problematic. There are other arrangements where you can use power line signalling. So it's just, people should be aware there are options. There's just not an Ethernet cable, a communications cable option. There are other options, and part of the feasibility, you should be exploring what all of those options are.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We didn't have any data in the garage at all, so we put in a router and some boosters as well, and there is connectivity to broadband in the garage, as well as Ethernet cabling to each termination point. So we've got both. But that, interestingly, also allows the modern cars these days, to upgrade their own software overnight if there's a software upgrade required at any time. So that was another convenient thing which came with the package, the installation package, and was part of our quotation.
So building on the additional benefits, it's really important because often people just think, oh, this is just about EV charging. It doesn't have to be. One of the things that we're working with at the moment is level 1 charging, and I think people generally understand level 1 is just a PowerPoint charging, level 2 is a higher speed charging. But with the level 1 charging, you actually get a PowerPoint in every garage. It doesn't have to be just used for electric vehicle charging. You could use it for vacuum, or if you've got room, put a fridge in. It's something that a lot of people haven't got, and it's something that's useful. So let's just not limit this thing, particularly when you're in a scenario where it might be difficult to get charging initiated. Think of the benefits for everybody.
That's right, and especially with the data communications in the garage now. Typically you're on a phone. When you drive into the garage, the phone cuts out. Yeah. And we're underground in a concrete bunker, and so that's been another piece of innovation which has come with the EV charging assessment program. So everybody wins a prize.
Even if you need a man cave, you've got somewhere to go.
Exactly, and a fridge.
A fridge. Yeah.
I'm interested just to understand from other perspectives as well. From an administrative standpoint, if an owner in your building wanted to join the EV backbone, what's the process from an administrative standpoint, i.e. who do they go to, how do they get there, is there an application form, is there a one point of contact? How have you managed that in your building?
Well, again, we've got a small building with only 11 owners and or 11 residents, and they're 90% owner occupied as well. So just talk to the chair of the body corporate who's a resident in the building, and he'll say, well, he'll instruct the strata manager to issue a work order to our supplier, and they'll come along and install it, and they just pay the body corporate. It gets added to their body corporate fees, or they just write a check out for the body corporate for the reimbursement of the cost of that installation. So everything's done at cost from our perspective. There's no margin to be made for the body corporate.
I guess that's easy to manage when you're in the smaller blocks where there's a bit of a community there and everyone sort of knows everyone else.
Yeah, and if it was for a larger block, there'd be a little application form saying, please supply and install a charger for me, signed off, and it goes into the system.
Yeah.
But we're a bit more informal than that.
Sure. This is certainly one of the approaches we've taken, where the chargers generally have a QR code to scan onto them, where you don't have RFID, which is the fobs you were talking about. So inside those QR codes as well, what we've done to make it easier for residents when they want to join the network is have a link within that QR code that they use to charge as well, so anyone can scan any charger, and it'll give them the option to sign up to have a charger installed. And we've got a little bit of a back-end process in there that we worked with the Owners Corporation, so that the Owners Corporation, generally speaking, don't really have to get involved in it, so no one has to put any effort into it. It's all done through automations and manual stuff.
Right.
Also, additionally, using that same technology, and we'll get to the operations side of it, we've also opted to store all the safety manuals and operations manuals within there as well, with a terms and conditions button before you charge that says that you've read the operations manual, you understand the safety aspect of it before that you can actually use the charging system.
Great. Fred, what bylaws will a building need in order to allow their residents to be able to connect to charging?
So in the first instance, OCN is the strong belief that you need a bylaw, because you're dealing with impacts on the building, you're changing the actual common property because you're running cables in the building, but also you're impacting the power supply to the building. So we think, number one, you do need a bylaw. Now, do you need a bylaw to put in the infrastructure and then a separate bylaw to attach to the infrastructure? I think that's a problematic area. We don't think so, and the OCN bylaw, which is available on our website, it actually takes an approach where all of the terms and conditions of the bylaw are in the guts of a bylaw, and then there's a register of connections. So anytime you want to connect somebody to it, you simply add the details, the apartment number, and register that. So we think that's an important and a simple way to add to it on the way through. And right at the very beginning, it also is sort of dependent on whether the application, the approach that you're going to take is one that's generated by an individual owner. And in that case, you might get the individual owner to run with all of the approvals and the bylaw and all that sort of stuff. Or whether it's the owner's corporation which wants to future-proof. And obviously in your example, the owner's corporation has said, we want to future-proof the building and then we'll put the infrastructure in. So there's two different approaches people need to think about, and there are different impacts on the bylaw.
So just to be clear, so are you suggesting that there should be two bylaws, or one bylaw for the electric vehicle?
One.
Oh, one. Well, yeah, sorry, misunderstood.
But a method of connecting, and a way of
Within
saying
that bylaw, yeah.
Joe and Harry and Harriet have connected to it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, understand.
And Scott, what kind of maintenance is required for this infrastructure?
So, like electric vehicle charging infrastructure and electric vehicle charging equipment, right? The infrastructure at baseline is just electrical infrastructure. It's no different to the maintenance that you would expect to be carried out in these buildings for your lighting, your emergency lighting, your fire alarm testing, your RCD safety switch testing. All that should be done on a regular basis. And I think for when we're talking about electric vehicle charging infrastructure, because it's in its infancy still, I think it's important for owners, corporations and contractors doing that to maintain a very detailed schedule of any testing and inspection that's been done, as well as any repairs that were subsequent of that. I think that's super important to have that in place before you even think about putting the electric vehicle charging infrastructure in.
And should buildings have a maintenance contract for EV chargers as well as everything else in their building?
That's very much a question for the individual owners corporation. Now, for the sake of continuity and making sure detailed record keeping is being taken place on and when it was prescribed to be done, I would suggest that having that as on a contract would make more sense, as opposed to doing it ad hoc and potentially having different people doing different things and not following the same procedures. So this is me and declaration. I have a commercial interest in this. I think it's important for owners corporations to have some form of contract in place for the maintenance to make sure it's being done and being done properly.
So just being a little bit counter to your view, just for a change.
Sure.
There's also the instance, and I think that's fine for the larger organisations where they can afford to do that. For the smaller ones where it's just a startup, it's just another piece of electrical infrastructure. And do you have a contract with an electrician? You might have a contracted electrician who knows about the building and comes and deals with it, but having a specific contract for smaller installations, the simple ones, I don't know that that's absolutely necessary. But again, you make the point that it's up to the owners corporation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a house electrician who's been with the building since it was constructed, and he comes and does all our repair work on a build basis, not on a retainer. So he does lighting, all the body corporate electrical work. He didn't do the installation. He's not experienced in this particular area, but he's totally across what's been installed and how it's been installed and how it's been wired, and he will check that for sure on an annual basis. We just had our regular fire inspection done for the council, and that was all ticked as just part of our regular electrical switchboard installation. So no particular requirements there for us. But again, we're a smaller building with 11 units, and it's fairly manageable at an informal level, as you say.
Yeah.
I think as long as the owners corporation are across the fact that it needs to happen and it's being done on a regular basis and they're making sure it's being done, I don't necessarily see how it has to be on a contractual basis. It could be done on a sort of ad hoc basis as you described there, as long as someone is across the fact that it should be done, needs to be done.
Yeah.
And if
that's the point. Yeah.
And if there is a fault in one of the chargers, it'll trip a switch at the switchboard, and people will say, "Well, this charge is now not working." What do we do? Root cause analysis. Go back to the switchboard, inspect the charger, and replace it out if it's faulty, or just flick the switch back on again.
Yeah,
great.
I think just to get my point across there, what I'm suggesting is that there should be, and what I think is more important, is that there's a detailed log of the maintenance and the inspections that are being carried out, much like you do with your fire alarm system.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks very much indeed.